Hello there! It's great to be here with you today. Whether you've had a long week or a short one, I'm here to share some amazing stories with you. Welcome to this compilation of incredible stories. If you've missed any of our previous videos or just want to watch them again, don't worry. Just hit the subscribe button and like this video and you'll have access to all of our amazing stories. Also, be sure to take note of the timestamps for your favorite stories and leave them in the comments below. We always appreciate hearing from our viewers and value your feedback. So, let's get started. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the show. Children of entitled parents, what was it like being that kid? Story 1. I'm not the child of an entitled parent, but my boyfriend sure as F is. His mom is something else, let me tell you. I think the first time I realized I was not going to get along with her, she had taken me and my children to get McDonald's for everyone. I already didn't want to go because I didn't know her well enough to be alone with her for any lengthy amount of time, in my opinion. But I went to make my boyfriend happy. A trip that should have taken like 20 minutes tops, she was getting food for 6 people, wound up taking close to an hour. When we got there, in the drive-thru no less, she took her sweet butt time ordering and asking these people all manner of questions about the food. We'd everything picked out beforehand, so she spent an extra 10 minutes questioning them for just her order alone. Then we get to the window and her card won't work. They tell her that it's their system, not the card. They always have issues with whatever type of card it was she had tried to use. Now, this woman has all manner of credit cards in her effing bag. She also always has at least $200 cash on her. My point being, she could have used a different method of payment. Instead, she makes them run the card like 6 more times. When that doesn't work and she's been screaming at the poor drive-thru person the entire time, she pulls up and parks. Makes me and my kids get out with her because she's acting like a raving lunatic. Says it's because she needs our help carrying the bags, but it's because she wants an effing audience. We go in, and she then proceeds to degrade the kid at the counter, call him names, tells him she's going to call the owner of this particular store because she knows her card will work here, and someone's doing something funny. The whole time, I'm apologizing. I told my kids to go play so they wouldn't have to witness it. I even offered to pay for the dang food. But she was making such a scene that they just gave her the whole effing order for free. Like, refused to take my money, probably because she screamed at me for even offering, and told her she had her food and to leave. I have hated her ever since. I have such a hard time understanding the mind of people who do that crap. Like, do they not realize how bad they look to literally everyone watching? I know fast food places aren't run the best, and there are problems worth complaining about at times. This just seems like such a weird thing to get worked up about and make a scene over. Story 2. After losing her job in oil and gas, which paid over $150,000 a year, I got the pleasure of paying her property taxes while she took out a reverse mortgage to renovate the $600,000 house for sale, which never happened. The end result was her being $150,000 in debt with an unsellable house. Then her BMW broke. Then her Jaguar broke. She refused to look for work outside of her industry for 3 years, then finally picked up some minimum wage work 3 years ago. The catch was, she needed my paid-off Japanese 4-cylinder economy car to get to work. I haven't lived with her for 15 years and walked to work, so it was feasible. This year she's been laid off and expected that I was going to keep paying her property taxes while driving my car. I told her I won't give her a dime and I'm taking my car back if the house isn't on the market. She acted like a bratty teenager and continues to accuse me of threatening her. I'm looking for a lawyer. Ideally, I'll sue her for the money she's borrowed, but ultimately, I just want her out of my life entirely. Story 3. Both of my parents fit into this category. Best example featuring Dad for this one is that they wanted to have dinner on my birthday and suggested I pick the place. I picked the wrong place apparently, so when we got there, my dad screamed at all the employees, demanded a manager, and told him how awful the service was, then left to get fast food while I was still eating. On my birthday. Although my mom thinking that my wife should take second place to her when we got married was pretty bad too. As for what it was like, embarrassing, stressful, and sadly impactful on my ability to form healthy relationships. I vacillated between terrified to speak up for myself and extreme anger at people. It really did a number on my dating relationships for a good long while, and my wife is super awesome to both be patient with me and help me learn healthy ways to express what I want in life. She's awesome. I knew it was on growing up, but when that's all you know from multiple angles, it can be quite difficult to define normal or to build healthy habits for social interaction. You know many things that are wrong, but don't know what to replace them with, and your emotions often are uncooperative. You know, every time I see awful entitled parents acting up in public, I wonder just what kind of effect they have on their kids, and if this instance is any indicator, it isn't great. I am glad to hear that you've managed to work through a lot of that and distance yourself from what they taught you. That couldn't have been easy, but it sounds like it was worth it. Story 4. My mom is very I want to talk to your manager. She complains about crap and treats service workers poorly because she sees them beneath her. She doesn't demand free stuff and usually doesn't ask for discounts, but she definitely complains and bees about everything. Like, she once nearly made a phone store employee cry because the in-store stock was different from the website, and my mom tried to argue with the poor girl and asked where she could lodge a formal complaint. Anyway, pretty much from a young age, I was embarrassed by her behavior because I never saw any other adults behave like that, and I knew it wasn't okay and wasn't normal. I stopped going places with my mom because I knew she would just be a jerk and I didn't want to be associated with it. By the time I was a teenager, I'd try to slip notes to employees apologizing for her behavior. Story 5. Embarrassing. I rarely went with her because I was always mortified. Then, when I was old enough, I would offer to go for her. That really helped. She loved the opportunity to stay at home while I did the errands, but oh my god, introducing my partner to her was so embarrassing. We went to a fancy seafood restaurant and she ordered Pinot Grigio. This place was so fancy that they gave you the spit bucket for wine. He comes over with the white and she starts screeching, "I didn't order that, I ordered red!" And he kind of stutters, and it's obvious this poor lad is about to panic. I'm like, "No, Mom, you definitely said Grigio." Poor boyfriend had no effing idea what we were talking about because he's not a wine drinker. After insisting she definitely said Grigio, me reasoning that I thought to myself, "Oh, I don't like white, so I won't drink tonight." A lie, I never drank when out with her, so I can drive because she always insists on driving home drunk. She accepts her mistake, but doesn't apologize to the waiter who's been awkwardly standing there while we had this discussion. I apologize to him, and my mom later says, "You know, it's really embarrassing when you apologize for me. You don't have to apologize to them. It's their job." But I just reminded her that I work in food service, so I understand how it feels to be treated like garbage at work and like to make things easier. Why is a restaurant giving you a spit bucket? Those are just for tastings when you don't want to drink too much, but are sampling a variety of wines from a vineyard or whatnot. I suppose you could be doing some tasting at a restaurant, just seems weird. Also, the biggest shame on your mom is just flat out ordering a Pinot Grigio and not a specific wine from the menu by name, or asking for pairing suggestions or something. Bring me your finest Franzia Red. Story 6. My mom technically isn't an entitled parent. She's generally absolutely lovely. A bit controlling, but that's a bother thing. But I honestly don't think she realizes that staff and waitstaff can only do so much. She'll get very indignant if food isn't quite right. For example, if it arrived a bit cold, which is fine, but when that happens, she normally wants a new meal instead of it being blasted in the microwave, which again is understandable, but doesn't mean that that's possible. She's also a pain when arguing with staff over tickets, etc. We went to Disney Paris a couple of years ago, and while we had paid for a full dining plan, it's not what we got. She spent a while arguing with the staff, which is once again understandable, but still awful. She'll get quite buddy if that doesn't happen until we point out that she's being a bit of a bee, and then she'll apologize and back down. It's still mortifying, though. I mean, if you paid for a full dining plan but didn't get what you paid for, that's a fair reason to complain and get that corrected. I mean, I guess I don't know how she went about it, so maybe that is the issue, but there is a difference between being reasonable and being a pushover. What trait do you most resent your parents for passing on to you? Story 1. I don't resent my parents for the traits I've been passed, but I have a pretty bad case of ichthyosis, essentially really, really dry skin. During my years of school, I would always forget my gym clothes and tend to wear long-sleeve shirts and pants year-round because people would always pick on me for it. No lotions I tried worked, so it was always bad, more so during the winter. Since then, I found ammonium lactate lotion helps this, and I've gotten a good handle on it. Definitely wish I knew that when I was in school. It wasn't a good feeling being known as a lizard. I've also always had very thin hair, and I'm currently balding at 24. Can't foresee having much hair by 26 to 27, and I'm relatively short. But hey, I was gifted with a pretty decent hog, and have found the love of my life who accepts me for me, so I guess things aren't so bad. Hell yeah! Always look on the bright side, and I'm glad you were eventually able to find something that helps, though it sucks dealing with that during school. School is hard enough without genetics piling on. As far as the going bald, well, as someone who shaves their head, might I suggest just leaning into it? Works for me. Story 2. Misophonia. I'm a super chill person otherwise, but for the longest time I get super mad if anyone was eating, drinking, swallowing, breathing audibly, or making any kinds of sounds. Pretty much anything short of speaking and sitting still pushed my buttons. With a lot of acknowledgement of my faults, I'd slowly been able to cope and even lessen the effect, however. The biggest thing I tell myself is that it is my fault, not the people around me, and I feel calmer. Sadly, my dad won't listen to my advice on the matter and constantly blames those around him. Then when I snap at him for snapping, he plays the guilt trip card. That dude just won't seem to take responsibility. Story 3. My feet smelled so bad in my teenage years I must have filled an entire classroom even if my shoes were on. I found a product online about 15 years ago that actually eliminated it completely. At that point, I would have poured acid on my feet to get them to stop smelling. The product is Exuber from JMG Products. It's almost like a paste you put on before for a few days. Completely wipes out the bacteria on your feet that causes it. Requires periodic maintenance, but it completely eliminated foot odor for me, and mine was awful. That is such a rough one to deal with in school. Oof, I am so sorry. But hey, good on you for sharing the secret to overcoming it. I'm pretty sure there's some struggling teen out there that is going to see this and will be thanking you for the rest of their life. Story 4. Cataclysmic craps. This is my family too. At get-togethers like Thanksgiving, the bathrooms are always full and smell like crap for days. My mom is the only one in the family that doesn't get explosive diarrhea all the damn time. Some of our favorite family stories involve trying to deal with explosive poops. Crapping in a bush while on a jog, crapping on the side of the road and it having the force to reach the fence. Crapping your pants because you couldn't make it to the bathroom. Story 5. Combine really sweaty hands with being more than averagely social. Shaking hands is naturally the first thing I do when I meet someone new, so they usually get the impression that I peed on my hand or I'm one very sweaty bastard. It's hard because personal relationships involve a lot of touching and you can't build if they assume you're sweaty everywhere. Also, sweaty hands are disgustingly soft, so it's just a weird feeling to other people. Squishy, warm, and wet, the devil's triad when it comes to things not hoo-haws. Might I suggest a timelessly cool look of wearing fingerless gloves all the time? Perhaps owning a collection of them so you can wash them regularly. I honestly have no idea if it is still cool or not, but wear it with confidence and you'll make it cool. I dress like either a hippie or someone who time-traveled from the late 90s, but I look super cool. Right? Story 6. My dad can never ask a question directly. I think it's because he's worried the question will provoke a negative response, but his solution of asking around the question until people get irritated isn't any better. I found myself doing the exact same thing with my mom the other day. I have to keep checking that I'm asking what I want to know instead of trying to get the other person to respond in a way I want them to. Example, Dad wants to know if Mom bought apples. Normally you just say, "Did you get apples?" My dad says, "Were fruits on sale? Were you in the fruit aisle? Did you check the shopping list? Did you unload all the groceries in their proper place?" And so on. Since I've also inherited a temper from both parents, the 20 questions always devolves into a fight. Fun times. Story 7. An explosive temper. You'd never guess by speaking to me that I have rage issues. I've worked really hard to not be like my dad. I don't let much get to me and try to live a mostly carefree life. If something sets me off, though, it's terrifying to see that person come out. It used to just be when I drank. I slowly see it more and more. It scares me sometimes. Honestly, there can be a lot of things that bring that stuff on and a number of ways to deal with it. It can be a symptom of ADHD for starters. And there are methods that you can learn for dealing with angry outbursts. I speak as someone who has dealt with inheriting very brief but angry outbursts from my family, and I honestly feel like I've really grown and made progress. You don't have to give up and accept it. I believe in you. High school teachers, what successful student of yours ended up much worse than you expected, and vice versa? Story 1. I went to high school with this guy who got a girl pregnant at 15. Not sure on all his details, but basically he stopped coming to school shortly after. To sort of complicate matters, his daughter's mother was pretty addicted to opioids, and after a few years, he ended up getting full custody after she failed a bunch of drug tests. He was never particularly smart or anything. I would have never expected him to go anywhere in life. In our senior year, I ran into him outside of school, and he told me that he had to drop out and work full-time to support his daughter. He started working in construction and started learning trades. Because he hit the trades at a super early age, he basically got a huge head start. He's probably around 28 right now, owns his own company and also his house, like no mortgage, free and clear, and is currently building a family cottage on a nice piece of land by the lake. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Never use a condom. Oh no! I am so happy things worked out well for the guy. And this is also a really great lesson about the value of trade jobs and whatnot, but also use a condom, folks. Something, causation, correlation, I don't know. Story 2. I thought I had a student that was a low performer turned success last year. I had a student for 2 years, junior and senior, and we did not get off on the right foot. He was making suggestive remarks, and I'm a young teacher. I went to my administration to have them talk with him, and he was convinced I didn't like him because of his race. I pushed for him to actually do work and didn't put up with his BS. I spell out my expectations for each assignment before it's begun, and I expect my students to attempt the assignment and slowly become better at their skills as the semester progresses. The student retaliated by not doing work, like literally not doing the essays, 50% of the grade, on his tests, and just flat out not doing classwork/homework. I did everything I could to rectify the situation. We spoke together with a counselor, brought in family members, had multiple one-on-one conversations, created behavior plans, the works. He ended up failing me junior year and was on course to fail me his senior year. A month before graduation and day he got his cap and gown, he pulled the counselor and me aside and said he wanted to graduate and he'd do what he could to pass my class. He busted his butt that last month and ended up with a 69.1. I had seen such an amazing turnaround in him. I had no issues bumping his grade to a 69.5, which rounded up to a 70. I gave him a hug at graduation and told him I expected great things from him. By this point, he and I were good. There was a mutual respect. I learned 6 months later he had a job at a local stitching company and was doing well. I was so incredibly proud and happy for him. He's now awaiting trial for murder in a drug deal gone wrong. Story 3. Not a student, but a classmate in high school that all the teachers at our reunions are always in awe about. Jenna moved to our upper middle-class town from the city in middle school. Nice enough girl, but didn't fit in and started hanging with the loser crowd. She got pregnant in 11th grade and her mom sent her off to one of those Bible summer camps, and it was well known throughout the school that she gave the baby up for adoption. To say senior year was rough for her socially was an understatement. When I would come home on break from school, I saw her around working cashier jobs and going to the local state school part-time. Her mom moved away, so she was on her own the day she turned 18. She came to the 10-year, and it turns out she joined the Air Force, so we exchanged emails. I'm in the Air Force too, and ping each other about once a year. 20-year rolls around, and our former principal, a retired Marine, just can't stop talking about how he really had faith she would turn her circumstance around, which is code for thought she'd never make it in life. She's now an officer and working at the Pentagon on the senior staff of some important generals. She made below-the-zone promotions her whole career and is getting ready to promote to colonel next year, which is one step below one-star general. You could see our former principal just completely engaged talking to her when previously probably only talked to her when she was suspending her from school. I know everyone expected her to turn out like a bad episode of Teen Mom, but she really turned that one around for sure. Honestly, that's an impressive story. She was dealt multiple rough hands in life and still managed to do well in life. I think giving up the kid for adoption was probably pretty helpful and not a bad option for those who don't want to pursue abortion. I know it can be hard to think about giving up a child, but I'm willing to bet both her child and her had a better life because of that decision. Still, I'm sure it was hard for her. Story 4. I do work in education. I work with special ed students. I had a student with autism I worked with. He was midway on the spectrum, not high functioning, but not high needs either. Anyway, when he was in high school, I was the only one who could get him to do work. He was often moody. I am of the belief that if you build a relationship with students, especially those with behavior and emotional needs, they will decide that they will work for you. Well, this kid would do his work if I was there helping him. He went to a program at the local community college aimed at special needs kids. This kid blossomed there. He took media classes, started writing ideas for shows and movies, literally became the rock star of the program. I ran into him at the school I work at graduation a few years ago. At this time, he had been out of my program for 2 years. He ran up to me and gave me a giant hug. He looked at me with a giant smile on his face, excitedly telling me about school and a trip he was taking with his media program to New York over the summer and how he had a girlfriend now. This was a kid who would talk with his head down and mumble most of the time. I nearly cried when he was telling me this. He was still considered part of the school district students until he aged out last year. I was told that at his exit meeting, he said one of the jobs he wanted was to come and work in the classroom as an assistant to Ms. Bijout. That's my boy. I love hearing these stories. I've worked with people on the spectrum and have people on the spectrum in my family. Sure, their mental and social needs are different from mine, but they're no less ambitious or accomplished. In fact, plenty of them are way more accomplished. They just need the right environment and understanding, like anyone else. Story 5. Not a teacher or a student, but I spoke to a high school teacher recently who told me how she had this one golden class about 10 years ago, and in this class there was one special girl. Kind to everyone, popular without being trained horses in her spare time, supportive and loving parents, and a straight A student who wanted to become a vet. I see a lot of girls who want to be vets, but this one had what it takes. The teacher said that if someone put a gun to her head and asked her to rank all the students she ever had in a 30-year career, this girl would be at the head of the line. That girl is now serving life in prison for killing her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend, chopping her up with a hacksaw, and burying the parts in the woods. What is considered cute when done by a kid, but illegal when done by an adult? I don't really know what to expect from this thread, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm scared. Story 1. Being completely honest with people. Edit. Wow, my comment went big, and thank you for the silver, kind stranger. It's my first time. I envy my kid for this. One day we were going on vacation to visit family. At the airport, someone asked him what he was going to do, where we were going. He had a little bit of a confused look for half a second, and then, very matter of fact, he said, "Whatever I want," in a tone like the person asked a stupid question. I think about that every day. He also pointed to a group of seniors off the bus from the nursing home in a field trip to Blue Plate's special restaurant and proclaimed, "Dad, look at all those almost dead people." Oh, I don't know if I should laugh at that, but I am also going to start using that as a term for old people who are jerks. Wait, nope, that makes me sound like a murderer, doesn't it? Damn it. It really is only cute when kids do it. That's not fair. Story 2. My friend, when he was just crawling apparently, was at a beach with his mom. She looked away for a second and he'd crawled over to a nearby topless sunbather sleeping on her back and tried to suckle on her. Obviously, she screamed and it didn't get far, but after much embarrassment, they did all laugh it off. As an adult, that's probably prison time. As a literal baby, it could have been much worse depending on the woman's response. At that age, a topless beach probably looks like a buffet. Story 3. When I was 5 or so, I went to a baseball game with my dad and he wouldn't let me get popcorn. I really wanted popcorn. I walked away and sat on a random man's lap, plus started eating his popcorn. I closed my eyes and pretended like I thought it was my father, like, "Oh, Dad, you got me popcorn, thanks." Because my child mind thought my dad would believe I thought it was him and wouldn't get mad. I don't think it would be very cute as a 21-year-old. Best thing I've read all day. I've got to say, I don't know if that is illegal for an adult to do, but it would certainly be extremely frowned upon, or extremely smiled upon, which might be an even bigger concern. Either way, best to avoid for all ages, honestly. Story 4. My 2-year-old stroked a flight attendant's behind with both hands as she was shifting something in the overhead bin next to our seat. Her skirt was very tight-fitting, right in front of his face, and I guess he just thought it looked nice to touch. She whipped her head around at light speed with a glare to send the offender up in flames. When she saw it was just a toddler and I apologized, she looked relieved and laughed. The way she reacted, though, made me think she probably has had that happen way too often by grown, gross dudes. Story 5. Running around in public naked. My 3-year-old was being potty trained at the time, and I took him to McDonald's after his vaccinations to cheer him up. He had a great time until he announced to me that he wet himself. So I go to my bag to get a change of trousers and pants to hear people laughing, and I look up from my bag. He dropped his trousers and pants to the floor and was shuffling to the bathroom door with them around his ankles with a big grin on his face, just his little butt exposed. I couldn't even be embarrassed. It was too funny. Story 6. Taking shortcuts through people's yards. Those were the days. I did this the other day. It cut almost half a mile off my trip, but as I was being nice and going around the flower beds, the guy came out and started yelling at me. I just rolled up my windows and turned up the music. Parents of a weird kid, how did you react when you realized that your kid did weird/creepy stuff? Story 1. He's not my kid, but my godson is extremely creepy. He likes to stand in his little sister's doorway while she naps and watches her sleep. I asked him why, and he says, it's the closest I can get to seeing her dead. He also likes to shove her fist in his mouth as far as it can go because he wants to know what suffocating is like just in case. I'm pretty sure he'd be a serial killer if it wasn't for Mario Kart. Edit. He is 8, she is 5. He hasn't done as many creepy things lately. It was mostly right after she was born. He had a hard time adjusting. He still says the odd weird thing here and there, but nothing as bad as when I mentioned above. His offhand comments are much more innocent, such as, I'm gonna sell you on Kijiji, and I'm gonna sell you for a quarter and ask for change, to his sister. Also, his character in Mario Kart is always Yoshi, and although he is unhealthily obsessed with the game, he's an otherwise normal 8-year-old. Yes, we're all aware of the healing powers of Mario Kart, especially Double Dash. I used to have night terrors, but Double Dash sure blue shelled those into oblivion. And it is good too, because that kid sounds extra creepy. I say extra because all kids are kind of creepy. They're like humans, but wrong, you know? Story 2. All these weird stories remind me of this thread about crap kids say. I was visiting family for winter break in Los Angeles. This was about 5 years ago. I was heading to the bathroom on the second floor of my aunt's house when I saw my cousin April on the stairs. April was 4 and very animated. She was busy making funny faces while sitting on the stairs. I asked her what she was doing. She said, I'm copying the lady with the braid. I looked around. There was no one else but us. I asked, where's the lady, April? She pointed to a bead running parallel to the stairwell. I asked April, what is the lady doing? She said, making funny faces. I smiled and started walking up the stairs again when April said something that stopped me in my tracks. April, her braids is around her neck. I turned back and asked April to repeat herself. April pointed. The lady is hanging by her braid. She's making funny faces. Then April started making a face, which I then realized was someone gasping for air. Story 3. My kid has been the weird kid since about 2 years old. His favorite bedtime stories were the user manuals to my appliances. At 3, he became obsessed with human biology and would watch open heart surgeries on YouTube. He was also obsessed with vacuums. For 4 years, he would spend hours in department stores demonstrating to shoppers how to use them. At 5, his summer plans was to teach himself mechanical engineering and physics. I could go on. When he turned 3 is when I started to suspect he was different. It scared the F out of me. He was my firstborn, so I had no idea if he was developing normally or not. His thirst for knowledge became extreme, and I didn't understand how to handle him, so at 4 I sent him to a child psychologist. I was terrified my son would have a nervous breakdown because although he was so young, he never once in his life played. All he did was learn. The psychologist made it clear to me that he was gifted, but that I had to force him to play. Otherwise, he would develop OCD and other disorders. I'm trying to make this short. He is 8 now and still different, but he does play, sometimes. I'm happy he is who he is, but I can see that he has a difficult life ahead of him. He doesn't have many friends, mainly because he would rather discuss the news than some new game or toy. I can say this, though. I don't think I'll ever meet another human being who is anything like my son, and I love that about him. I mean, hey, as long as he's happy and you're supportive in the right ways, I think that's great. I would be kind of scared if a 5-year-old was teaching me about vacuums in a store, but to be fair, I don't particularly like when adults do that either. I am a little concerned with watching open heart surgeries at 3 because how does a 3-year-old find that stuff on their own? And if he wasn't, why are you showing it to him? Story 4. Not my kid, but my nephew. He's 10 years old and is being taken out of school for homeschooling. He had major troubles learning and fitting into the classroom in general. The weird kid aspect is this crush that he has on a girl in his class. I hesitate to say crush because it's full-on creepy 10-year-old stalking. His parents have had probably 30 talks with him about moving on and that this girl will not ever see him as anything positive and then he needs to get over it. He's seen 2 different counselors who recommend he be taken out of any such situation in which he might be around her because he's completely obsessed with her. This causes him to have a panic attack because it's part of his identity. His exact words were, "If I'm not the boy who likes blank, then I don't even know who I am. That's me. I'm the boy who likes blank." He isn't allowed to have any type of electronics that can take pictures because he took his iPod to school and took a bunch of pictures of this girl. His parents are worried about where this will go, so to try and combat it, they had him pulled out of school and he's in serious counseling. He's a sweet kid, but holy F, does he have some major fundamental problems. Story 5. I came home from work one night to find my darling 2-year-old blonde daughter standing at the top of the stairs, staring up at the full moon in her jammies, teddy bear in hand. She should have been in bed by this time. Not wanting to scare her, I walked up the stairs, knelt down next to her, and asked her what she was thinking about. I was imagining she would say something childish like, "Is the moon really made of cheese, Daddy?" Something cute like that. Instead, she turns to face me with a very serious look on her face and in a very serious and creepy monotone voice says to me, "We are all in the same cage." 2 years old! I nearly died of fright. I literally recoiled from her and ran back down the stairs backwards. I couldn't believe it. She said a few more creepy things like that, but it stopped after a while. Update, that was 12 years ago. She has since turned into a very happy and well-adjusted teenager who's only slightly in league with Satan. Hey, if you say so. I'm sure she hasn't been plotting against you all these years, regaining your trust after those early slip-ups, all while she waits for the moment when the planets align and the sacrifices must be made. She knows you must love her, for without that power, the 4th seal that binds the Dark Lord cannot be shattered. What normal activity seems suspicious when done at 3 a.m.? Story 1. Just driving while being a young person, apparently. I live in a medium-sized town in the Midwest, about 35,000 people, and when I was about 18 or 19, I just grabbed my car keys and go for late-night drives when I couldn't sleep. I've suffered from horrible insomnia since I was little, or was anxious about something and needed to think. Our town has some beautiful historic districts, beautiful graveyards, parks, and a picturesque downtown area, and I just put on some music that I like and drive through them. It was so relaxing. 7 times out of 10, I get pulled over by a cop. Not for doing anything like breaking a traffic law or something, but just because a passing cop on duty would be driving past me, see that I was a teenager, and pulled me over and questioned me. They'd always be like, "How old are you?" 19? "Okay, so what you doing out this late? Why are you out driving around at 1 a.m.? And I just tell them the truth, that it was how I dealt with stress. I found it very calming, and it helped me think when I couldn't sleep. I was well past the age of being subject to curfew, so they had to let me go. Some of them would follow me for a while before getting bored, but more often than not, I get pulled over just for being a young driver out and about so late. I'm from a Midwest town, less than half that size, and used to cruise around alone or with friends when we were in high school, and I've got to say, never really had any problems. Then again, in my hometown, I'm pretty sure the cops had their hands full dealing with drunks. Story 2. Ringing a doorbell. There's only one time anyone rang my doorbell in the middle of the night. I was about 8. My dad answered the door to find a man with a profusely bleeding gash in his forehead. His wife was driving a car with him and crashed into a tree in front of her house. She was still in the car, unconscious. I was really young, so I didn't understand what was going on at the time, but in hindsight, I'm sure they were drunk. So what I guess I'm saying is, yeah, normal things don't coincide with 3 a.m. doorbells. Story 3. Digging a hole. When my cat had to be put down, they gave us her body wrapped in a blanket so we could bury her. We got home around 11 to midnight-ish, and my dad goes into the garage and gets a big shovel and can't find any flashlights, but he does find an oil lantern. So there we are. My dad has the shovel on his shoulder and the bundle in hand, and I'm following behind with the lantern. We go to the open field by the house and commit the deed. I think your pet would have been proud to have such a dramatic and suspicious funeral, as befitting a cat. Yeah, and also the fact that for just one last time, the cat inconvenienced you in the middle of the night when you would rather be sleeping. I think your kitty would like that. But more seriously, it is nice you all took the time to do that. It is tough to lose a pet. Story 4. Getting water from the sink downstairs in my house, apparently. Never seen my dad come downstairs so fast. I tried this and had my mom come upstairs and grab a big 8-inch chef's knife before screaming at me to freeze while she turned on the light. I was 3 and had been banging around trying to get the stool so I could reach the glasses. I wasn't scared, just confused. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.